In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup. Welcome to another episode of the Midcon Markup. Today, super fortunate to be joined by a good friend and mentor, Lynn McBee.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Lynn, you are a woman of many talents, many titles, many accomplishments. So you've had a successful career in drug development, initially a biochemist. Your civil service has no bounds. You really give to your community. You've been CEO or chair of lots of different major nonprofits in Dallas. Before we delve into all of these incredible professional accomplishments, can you walk us back step one? What was childhood like for Lynn McBee, and how did those formative experiences shape your current trajectory?
Sure. And I'm happy to be here with you, Cody. Thank you for inviting me. I grew up in a very small town in South Texas and was always very curious and always someone that was out science and nature. And at that time, girls were more playing with baby dolls and not so much chemistry sets and collecting rocks and bugs and all the different things. And so I was definitely more scientifically focused. My dad was a mathematician, and so he encouraged me in, what my interests were. I think at that time it was a little bit odd, like, why isn't she playing with things that her sisters were playing with, the Barbie dolls and all that? But I think growing up in that little town, you hit on the service piece. When you grow up in a little town, everybody's in everything together. You all go to the same school together. You all play together. And so there are no boundaries. There's not, there might be an east side of town and a west side of town, but everybody's funneling in. So you really learn to take care of your neighbor and you want things to be better for everyone. So I think that civic piece started then, like giving back and helping others. And then that kind of curiosity and problem solving and definitely that scientific mindset started very young, just my interest in science and nature and how things work in the world.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what led you to pursue a biochemistry degree? And then what were the early steps of the career that led you to drug development?
I think, I went into the University of Texas at Austin, like most kids at the College of Natural Sciences, thinking you were going to get your MD or your PhD, because at that time there weren't a lot of, now it's very multidisciplinary. You can get a marketing function with something in biochemistry and go work for the business side of a drug company. Those things didn't. It was like pretty hardcore. You were going to get a PhD or MD. And I thought I would get an MD. That was kind of what, where I was headed. And when I got a little bit through, higher level classes, my older sister got very ill. I was in the hospital a lot with her. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not a life I want. And so what do? You think, I'm going to get a PhD. So actually, after I graduated from UT Austin, went to Baylor College of Medicine to work on my PhD in biochemistry. I was in the College of Molecular Biology. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. And I think, if you're someone that's driven and disciplined and goal-oriented as you are, you can't imagine abandoning anything ever. It's like, we've got to finish the plan. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And one of the labs that I was rotating through used a lot of products from a company that I ended up being employee 75 of, New England Biolabs. And I was like, if I'm not going to get a PhD, a master's at that time wasn't a career trajectory move that much upward. And so I was like, I'm going to try the biotech. And so I sent my CV to 2 companies. I was invited to interview with both. And I flew up to Boston. I interviewed with New England Biolabs, was hired as employee 75. It's now a company of over 700 people. It was a little bitty, tiny. We're still privately held. We're a very large company now. And so that was how I ended up there. But it was really by abandoning something that I thought I would do and taking a step and going, I don't think this is what I want to do. And that was a hard thing to kind of swallow. I kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to finish this. I'd finished everything my whole life. So, but you got to kind of go with what life puts in front of you, and you never know. And it ended up being a great decision.
What did your mom or other family members think about that? Because, traditionally, they're very degree oriented. Worst case scenario, you could always practice medicine. You can always be a professor. What was that conversation like?
I mean, both of my parents went to college. My dad went to UT. My mother went to SMU, and they just knew me as someone that was driven and goal oriented, and I was going to complete whatever task was in front of me. And so I think, obviously, they wanted me to be happy, and it was, I think, a little bit kind of shocking for them. I remember my dad was like, "Well, maybe you can probably go back and go to pharmacy school and be because pharmacists always have jobs, and they're good jobs for women. You don't have to work, I was like, but I don't want to fill drug bottles at Eckerd Drugs. I don't even know, Eckerd's doesn't even exist, but Eckerd Drugs was the precursor to a CVS. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But kind of these pragmatic kind of what is going to really sustain her? What's she going to do with this degree? I'm sure you understand. But when I got the job, they're like, okay, she's got a job. But then I had to move to Boston, to a place I didn't know anything about. So they went along with it, but they were definitely going, why don't you go to pharmacy school? I'm like, I have a biochemistry degree. Why do I want to go to pharmacy school and which I have all respect for pharmacists and it's a good career, but it just wasn't what I needed to do.
So there's one step about your family history that we skipped over. Do you come from a famous family of Texans by chance?
Yeah, I do. I'm a 7th generation Texan, related to Stephen F. Austin. His sister, Emily, is my great-great-great-great-grandmother. So the first 300 families that came to Texas, the old 300 were part of that. And we're Stephen F. Austin's my, 4th great uncle. He had no children, so all the descendants to that family come through the sister, Emily. So, yeah.
Okay, so
been here a long time.
So there's only one sister.
Correct. Yep.
And so your whole life, was it just part of the family lore that you guys were Texas royalty? I mean, now, people wherever else you are in the country may not be aware of this, but in Dallas, Lynn is a very big deal. She's
you're sweet.
Much beloved. Everybody knows her. Has run for mayor, hopefully again. But what has it been like growing up in Texas? Did kids realize that in school? Did teachers realize that? Did you feel special?
Well, my mother, it's a testament to my parents who did a great job, I think, raising us, really kind of balancing and tempering anything so that things weren't, it wasn't, there were more things that defined us than that. That could be something that could be a very defining thing. And it wasn't. It was about, doing right by your neighbor and being given a lot of gifts and making sure you're giving back and all of those things. But in the town that I'm from, it's Emily Austin's still buried there and Stephen F. Austin's now at the state cemetery. But there still is a lot of, if you're from Brazoria County, which is the cradle of Texas, people know about the old 300. And in the state, I serve on the Texas History board down at the Bullock Museum. And so I think there's an appreciation for it. There's an appreciation for people that were pioneers in this state. So
where was this small community that you grew up in?
Yeah, it's Brazoria County, and it's Freeport. And so you've got Freeport and Lake Jackson and Clute. And here's some trivia on Clute. If you know Buc-ee's, the beaver thing started in Clute, Texas. And so when I was in high school, my sister and I would go to Buc-ee's. They're a small little convenience store because they had clean bathrooms and they had really good crushed ice. And so from that little store in Clute, Texas, which is right next to Freeport and Lake Jackson in Brazoria County, where Stephen F. Austin brought the first 300 families, a lot of Karankawas, a lot of mosquitoes, right there on the Gulf Coast. That's where Buc-ee started too. So,
okay,
interesting trivia.
Proximity to big cities here.
Yeah, it's about an hour south of Houston, and it's about, if you follow the beach road, it's about 45 minutes south of Galveston. So
45 minutes south of Galveston.
Yeah.
So down towards Corpus Christi.
Yeah, but further north. Yeah.
Okay, so out of the valley. So up
the coast.
It wasn't as much Hispanic.
Southeast.
So it wasn't as large of a Hispanic influence as the valley.
Not as large as the valley, but still very large. 50% of my class, I would say, was Hispanic. Yeah. So yeah, large. I mean, much more now, because our state is, right. And so, but yeah, not like the Valley, but still very highly. Yeah. Which again, that diversity of going to school with kids that were different from you, that have backgrounds that were different from you. I mean, I think it makes you appreciate different cultures, different people. It lets you, makes you more adaptive to different situations. So I'm really happy that I grew up in a small town, because I think it lets you explore a lot of different things, learn a lot about a lot of different people. Because you can live in a big city and you can choose to never go to parts of town that if you did, you would learn so much, you would gain so much, the old living in the bubble. You can do that. But I think there's the richness in life and helping others and is found in those other places that aren't the places that you normally might spend your time.
So it sounds like your civic engagement and inspiration comes from your childhood,
no doubt,
where you had very diverse experiences. You went to school and had friends from kids with very different backgrounds, very different home lives and cultures, and you just developed this, I guess, some combination of curiosity and empathy.
Yeah. I think again, I'm going to take it back to my parents and my grandmother that were, you have a duty to do right by others, and we were always helping in the little town, right? I mean, we were, giving furniture that we had to people that needed the furniture when we were done with it. We were always doing things at the church to help. We were doing Meals on Wheels. We were doing things to help people. And again, in that small town, you're thrown into a situation that you want everybody to thrive. It hurts you as a little child to see people have less than you, or to come not prepared for school. I mean, I was always prepared for school. I was always dressed well. I was always ready to go. I was lucky to have those positive influences, but you realize that there are kids coming to school that are much different, that had I grown up in a big city, I would have been with kids that were all like me. But because I grew up in a small town, it was all flavors of life and all diversity of life. And it makes you more relatable with people. I think that empathy piece really develops at a very young age, and that real kind of like, I really want to help this person because they're hurting, their life isn't as good as mine. And if I can share a sandwich, give a sweater, whatever it is, at that age, you want to help. So.
Okay. So at some point in your career, you were definitely nose to the grindstone, head down, trying to make progress with your biochemistry career, drug development. At what point did you make the decision, hey, let me carve out a few hours a week and give to this cause here, and then let me carve out a few hours a week to give this cause here, because that's a process that has never ended.
It hasn't
to this day.
Yeah,
like.
I keep accumulating things. It's like I need to
I bet you'd have a hard time naming everything that you're involved with off the top of your head in one sitting.
Yeah. I think, again, it's a slippery slope that you start sliding down, and always, in like when I moved to Boston, kind of seeking out things that were volunteer opportunities that were meaningful for me, always making that part of my life because it's enriching. It's good for me. The work that I do now, as you said, it's kind of like, you do a little here, you do a little here, and the roles get bigger and more complex. And where I am now is really kind of system-wide change. How do you change systems? And that has to do with, educational disparities. That has to do with, why does someone end up in a homeless situation? Lack of so many opportunities, so really looking at kind of things at a system level now to have more scalable change and impact. I still get on the ground and do on the ground activities proximate to where the needs are. But I think I'm up here really like, why does this system not work? How can we strengthen the public education system so that every child has an opportunity to, have a career path or a trade or a vocation? And then what does that mean for workforce? And what does that mean for once they have money and financial literacy? So it's a very, I think it's much more complex now. So, but at the heart of it, it's like, how do I help people? How do I help them achieve a better life? And it's pretty much that basic, but it's grown into much more complex things. Homelessness, public education, workforce. These are not easy topics. They're very deep. They're very complex. There are challenges at every step of the way. It's dealing with a human who has everybody has different needs. And so in terms of scaling, it's hard because everybody's got different transportation needs or childcare needs or whatever the need is. So it's complexities, but I like that. I think that's the scientific kind of problem solving kind of, that's where that kicks in for me. That's where my mindset, I think, helps me, my scientific mindset, if you will.
So in terms of impact programs, whether they're philanthropically funded, publicly funded, some combination of the two, academic literature for a long time has been pointing towards earlier intervention in childhood, reducing adverse childhood experiences and trauma. But I've always had this question. It's like, well, yeah, but like, what happens if the kid's parents don't have a job? Like, isn't that also related?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is related.
Being able to pay rent and keep food on the table,
have a stable environment,
and have less desperation in the household where we know leads to more instances of substance abuse or domestic violence.
Yeah, I mean, it's all that. I mean, you have to have a stable home for a child to learn in. I mean, I think there's some statistic I read recently, and it was if a child moves like it's either 3 or 5 times by the time they're in 3rd grade, just how much less their reading, comprehension is. And so these things are all, again, that desperation mindset. You can imagine if you're a child and you're moving around all the time, just that wanting that stability and always seeing your parents worry and you worry. So it's very, the things that we do, or the lack of things that we've done in the past, I mean, or the decisions we've made have outcomes for people, right? And I've said this as I've gotten into the workforce work more, that I've no doubt that I could train, not me, but a training provider can train anybody to do entry-level skill jobs, phlebotomy, patient care technicians, airplane mechanic, different types of entry-level jobs. But, we're all creatures of our influences around us. And if you haven't had those positive influences, you won't know how to go to work every day. And we can't put that off on the person. They didn't have those positive influences. So the behavioral piece becomes such an important piece in the workforce, having those navigators and those coaches and those people to say, atta girl, atta boy, keep, if you haven't had those, I was lucky to have those. I bet you were lucky to have those, people pushing you and cheering for you. If you haven't, you don't know any differently. So you've got systems that have failed people. And then the more the system fails people, you fall into this generational poverty. And we've got 3 generations of poverty in parts of our city. And so, again, teaching someone a skill is just one part of it. The behavioral piece of working someone out of what they're used to is really hard. And so, that system level change and, public education starting to address at an earlier age and starting to think about, what do we need to do in the system to support a good 3rd grade reading outcome? How do we have really good quality childcare? I mean, I would argue and like to see childcare put into some of our elementary schools and some of our different feeder patterns that have a lot of poverty, because you've got probably siblings already going to the elementary school. And if you can have that really good childcare experience where the child is learning, and then can just flow right into that elementary school, it's going to be better for the parents. They're not going to worry about dropping their child off at probably inadequate childcare, and that child's going to be learning. And so, again, what's a system approach that we can implement that's actually going to have some change? And there's another side to that, like, kids should be in a different learning environment, and the public education system shouldn't do that part. But in big urban districts with a lot of poverty, families don't have the luxury of having all of these, childcare is expensive, so putting it in the public education system is something I think to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting proposal, and it's pragmatic. If you just look at the cost of childcare rising over time, something has to give.
Right.
And I hear it all the time, and I'd be very interested to have your perspective on this, but people say to me, oh, well, philanthropy should be solving that problem, or this or that. And it's like, well, guys, let's not discount the fact that a public system and institutions are going to be the most effective option.
Always.
It takes a long time to steer that ship.
Yep.
But just the magnitude of the resources, the economies of scale,
right.
It's really unmatched.
Yeah. I mean, 91% of kids go through the public education system. So focus on how you strengthen that system, and I think, focus on where the need is. The good news is we're rich in data, right? Everybody's got data. We now know where our poor zip codes are. And it's funny, there's irony here that the Parkland Community Needs Health Assessment report that they put out, the most unhealthy zip codes are where all the poverty are and where all of the, lack of learning. And so it's like, we know where the people are, right? We know where people are. We've got data that will point us to. And so when you look at what do those families need, I'll give you one real quick. We did, in terms of workforce, we did 4 cohorts of phlebotomists and got women through this program. So they were earning a sustainable living wage. About 30% dropped out of the program because when you put the $1,500 a month in childcare in it, they're like, well, we can't afford to do this. So they would go back to their non-sustainable living, non-skilled job because it gave them the flexibility to take care of their child. And so, it's really, again, a system that is not working for people. And so if you had that early childhood really good on the elementary school, guess what? That mom could still practice her phlebotomy, drop her child off in a safe, stable learning environment, and a place you could go to elementary school all the way through. So again, it's looking at where the need is. Data will tell us where that need is, and then figuring out like the system that needs to support the people that are living there. And it's complex, right? And so, but again, public education is where I would start because it's a big system. Public education, public health. I mean, they're set up to address the needs of a lot of different people.
So supplementary funding for public education to take care of early age childcare. Where would that come from? Because the Department of Education, that's a federally funded initiative. Like, would you have to take this to the
state
federal
legislature
level or the state legislature,
level.
and they could supplement the federal program?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it could come out of the state legislative session, which will start up in 2025, right? So we've got one coming up to really look at, how we put that early childcare that's really good in some of these elementary schools. And so I think that could, make its way through. I don't know. It's definitely something that I want to bring up and talk about. And I don't think it's a really out there idea. I think it's, again, a very pragmatic, like what makes sense, like where's the need, where are the people, what's the system that can help address that. I think there's some innovative things happening here in our city right now with a couple of nonprofits. One, Annie's House, which has had a rename. I think it's called Mommy's something, but anyway, it was called Annie's House. And they do drop-in and also slotted childcare in the healthcare system. So at Parkland Hospital. People that have low wage jobs that need good quality childcare. And then they also do drop in for people that have loved ones in the hospital. So that's starting to replicate. And so that's a nonprofit. So that's that, private in the public setting to try to help enhance what. And so they've actually, there's some foundations that are funding their work, and it's really good work. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a step back from this conversation, and can you provide advice for an aspiring biotech entrepreneur? So maybe somebody who's in college and they're thinking, I don't know if I want to go to med school, or they're early in their career and they're looking, should I go into drug development? For startups, it's not easy to just get a little bit of funding, prove what you need to clinically, and then have, advance to stage 3 trials. There's a bunch of different steps in the process. How should entrepreneurs be thinking about this as a career option? And what's the best advice that you can give them to have success, to push the drug to that next level, to where a New England Biomedical would be a purchaser?
Yeah. I mean, I think for one, it's building a strong group of mentors around you that can help guide you. Right. I mean, cause you're not going to get there alone. It's very difficult. And so I think, depending on where you are with whatever product or your ideas. It's like the mentors that you bring in, and then really putting yourself out there a lot. I mean, it's hard work, right? It's meeting with people, talking about your idea. It's, probably spending a lot of years in labs, perfecting whatever it is that you're working on that you think is unique and different. But it's that mentorship piece, and it's really putting yourself out there and asking for help and just persisting. It's really hard. I mean, you have to get in with a large lab and learn as much as you can, and take those skills, and it's very difficult, but you're just gonna have to be in the space and surround yourself with the people that can help you get there,
So step one is try to get a job with the big company and then learn standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
This is how you run the lab. This is how research is performed. This is what drugs seem exciting and what people think there's big market opportunity for, but also the relationships with the people, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
That's where the closest mentorships come from whenever you have direct professional experience.
Most of the stuff that's coming out of labs that needs to be commercialized. I mean, it's a PhD scientist, right? And they're like, I have got an idea, or I've got a method, or I've got something that, and so those PhD scientists are at these, institutions of higher learning, right? Like you take a UT Austin that's got a lot of really good benchtop research. And so, and Austin's like it's on fire. And so down at UT Austin, my alma mater, looking at how do we commercialize more of the stuff that's coming out of the lab. So if you're a young undergrad, putting yourself in a lab with someone that has cool technology that you're interested in, putting your research in something that, and then, surrounding yourself with mentors, and then taking advantage of all of the, there's always a symposium or a conference, and network, and really do, you got to work it from all angles, that, because you never know who you're going to meet that's going to take you, one more step on your path. But I think you got to be in the space. You got to be actively working on, moving things forward. It's not going to come to you,
So what about the hustler archetype, the person who builds relationships with the PhDs who are heads down doing the research, and they connect all of the dots to take it from an academic setting to commercialization? Like,
there's a need.
How do you become that person?
Yeah, I mean, there's a need. I mean, I think first you have to, obviously you're going to have to come with resources, right? I mean, like, come with resources and a path forward to actually help whatever the commercialization of that product or procedure or methodology is, right? I mean, a lot of the things that are coming out of labs are processes, and, it's a way of combating a disease, or a way or a methodology. So you're coming with some IP, and you're coming with something that, but you've got to have the background in either proving up that you've been able to take something from the benchtop and commercialize it. I mean, there's a lot of, all the big hospitals have tech transfer offices. They're always looking at, what technology do we have that we can transfer out? But it always comes down to money, and then the person that actually can just get the job done, right? And so I think you have to have a proven track record. So how do you get there? Probably shadow someone that is in that space that's been successful there, right? And so I would say get in with someone that you can learn from, and might make you then part of their business, make you part of their equity, right?
So it seems like the dream scenario is go to college, study something like biochemistry as quickly as possible, try to get into a lab with a professor assisting them with their research, try to get an internship at a big company where you really see, like,
or a small one that's growing,
or a small one that's growing,
because you'll have equity.
What is the talent like, and how invested are those people in your development?
Very, very,
and then,
very. Yeah.
And then after you go through those steps, then you really try to find who is that hustler who's connecting all these dots for the PhDs and is creating value, and is the face of the next startup that gets acquired by New England Biomedical.
Yeah. I mean, those would all be paths, or, again, going with a startup company that is growing, that is investing in their people. I mean, I think, it all goes back to, people investing in people spending time with people mentoring people, I mean, you've got to put into it. And, I was honestly very lucky to land in New England Biolabs with, as an early employee of a company that is still privately held, and the owner cared so much about his people, and he cared so much about the research, and he was so focused on, making products that would really change for the better, so I think, it's mission driven work on some level, right? Because it's improving people's lives with the things that, we're creating, we're making. So, and it's, if you can get in on one of those and it's, you have equity in it, it's a good thing. There's,
So as a young student, or, somebody early in their career, like, how do you spot the difference between a winner and a loser whenever a lot of it is research that has to be sorted out over the next 3 or 4 years? Like, should you be really focused on the market, like size of the opportunity?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a cancer drug. The cancer market is worth this.
Yeah.
Or like,
yeah, I mean,
how do you make decisions based on very incomplete information?
Yeah. Well, the good news is there's a lot more information now than there was when I was coming up, right? It was kind of, you just kind of learned by doing. And, but I think now putting yourself in the environment that is growing. If you're, here in Dallas, we're growing in the biotech. We've got biolabs over at Pegasus Park. There's a lot of things that are, Texas is going to have a real presence in biotech. Right now you think about the Northeast and you think of the Silicon Valley and everything that's going on in terms of technology and biotech. But Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, huge cities with lots of people moving here, companies bringing their technology here. And so putting yourself in an environment, like, be in the city where it's happening, right? And get a job at one of the companies where it's happening, and surround yourself with mentors that will help guide you. And, because here's the thing, we're all getting older and we want people to come behind us and continue the work, to continue, growing the company, or, investing in, whatever it is. We want to hand it off to the next generation. So I think you've got people that will be invested in, people that wholeheartedly are working hard and are authentic in what they want to accomplish too, right? Yeah. There's no quick buck to be made. I mean, there's not. You got to put the time in, right? And you've got to, put yourself in the environment that's going to help you get to where you want to go.
Okay, so similar question.
Yep.
What advice would you have for a social change maker, whether they're a social entrepreneur, whether they're a community advocate, whether they're a nonprofit entrepreneur?
Yeah.
How do you take this empathy and like desire to do good and efficiently take steps to maximize your benefit?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this, it's like never losing sight of the mission and like what you are or were founded on. I think that's a lot of the problems that you see is when people get, mission creep and they go do things that are off mission. Stay passionate about what you're passionate about and what you're doing the work on, and get really good at that, and figure out then how you, can replicate that, take that to another level. I think, with my Young Ones Prep Network, we now have 12 public schools that we invest in. What we're also now doing is we're commercializing some of our curriculum and our content and our best practices so that we can sell it for revenue to help continue our operating, but also to have more impact across the nation. Because right now we're investing in schools in Texas, but good practice is good practice. Good policies are good policies. There are things that you can package up and you can sell to, benefit others and have impact. So I think staying passionate and staying focused on what your work is, we're good at investing in girls' education. I don't have anything against boys' education. It's just not what we're good at. But there are some practices that we can take that and apply to all genders that are going to work. And so we're going to figure that out. But we're not going to get way off of way off of our mission. We're just going to figure out how we can impact more, more kids. So I think, taking it back to like, just, I SWOT analysis everything. I will SWOT something to death. I mean, it is like over and over and over. And I always go back to that tool because it really does. It's very basic, but it really does let you know, what are you good at? What are you not being so good at? And who's going to come and take your playbook, or who's going to come and scoop up what you're doing. And you can't focus on that. You got to focus on what you're controlling and what you can do, and stay so driven on the mission of. And I think the thing for me is always staying proximate. Like, I always get to my schools, see the girls. And when I do that, it is like, it's pressure because I want to do the right thing for them because they need these opportunities because no one else is going to give it to them. And so staying proximate with the population you're trying to serve will drive you to work hard and stay focused. So,
okay, I've got to ask a question about a topic that I know is very near and dear to both of our hearts, and that's homelessness. It is a topic that is catching national headlines now.
Yeah.
I think many people in society have lots of misconceptions about the problem. They view the population as homogenous. They think that people are just lazy. They don't want to work hard. Like, what does the world not know about the problem that they need to know? And what is the future of addressing homelessness efficiently?
It is extremely complex. There's no homogeneity to it. People are individuals, and they come with so many different backgrounds, and they come with substance abuse, mental health abuse, or mental health issues. But the basic thing that they come with, they have no coping skills to go through life with. And it can be a varied reasons they have no coping skills. But I have done intake at the Bridge here in Dallas, which is the largest. We see 90% of Dallas is homeless. And the thing that I walk with every time is that the things that throw them into homelessness are things that you and I would easily navigate through. Like, someone has a fight with their mom because they're living with their mom, and then they're mad about that, so they go and decide they're going to live on the bus. It's like there's some disconnect. There's no coping mechanism. They don't have the skills they need to address the challenges that are coming at them, and that could be a mental, it could be the substance abuse thing. So it's a complex problem is the first thing. And there's not a one-stop shop that's going to be the solution for everything. You've got to have many different levels and a continuum of care to address it. You've got to have, intensive intake and case management. You've got to have many different types of housing. You've got to have supportive housing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing. So there's not one thing that's going to fix it. It's going to be a cadre of things across the continuum. They're going to do that. And you've got to have all of those systems talking together, tied together to really address it. So it is extremely complex. And there's a population of people that just don't want to come in off the street, and so you've got that population too. But it's hard work, it's complex work. But at the bottom, it's the lack of coping skills to get through life is what you see. It's hard.
And how's that addressed? Like, what are the components of coping skills? Right, there's some component of that is self-esteem, like just the belief that I have the ability to genuinely express myself to somebody else.
I deserve that.
And
people have loved me and told me.
And have them trust them.
Yeah, it's the trust piece. It's having, again, those positive role models and influences. You had parents that were cheering me on, that were not, these are different households and, patterns of abuse, patterns of substance abuse.